Whatever I choose, whether in the election or whether in the supermarket, this is my free will. That's over. Free will. That's over. Free will. That's over.
Klaus Schwab's World Economic Forum in Davos is set to have families and anyone who cares about children up in arms. The World Economic Forum is now calling for the decriminalization of sex with children, arguing laws against age gap love, more commonly known as paedophilia, violate human rights. This appeals to the WEF and their vision of destroying the family unit and depopulating the earth.
You brought up some issues that others are reluctant
That's my
to
trouble.
bring up.
Always. All the religious groups are against me because I'm talking about population. They want more souls. I want less on the planet.
At what point do we stop and say enough? Make no mistake, a coordinated attempt is underway to present paedophilia as harmless. WEF, which has ordered mainstream media to begin pushing the narrative, wants to introduce an international policy that will require the majority of countries to decriminalize or at the very least relax their laws against paedophilia. According to the global elite in Davos, it's time for mainstream society to catch up with them and relax the outdated social taboo against paedophilia. And what better way to change society's morals than by brainwashing the children? Just this week, Klaus Schwab was caught bragging about how the World Economic Forum has completely infiltrated education systems in many countries.
We put emphasis on what I said before, public-private partnerships, which we accompany. So when we define a project like our global educational initiative, I just describe it in a second. We have, under the leadership of Cisco and many other companies, practically all the big names, we try to revolutionize the educational system of Jordan, Egypt, and now Burundi, by working together with the local authorities. We work also together with UNESCO, not only to equip the schools, but to retrain the teachers, to put the new curricula into place. So we work together with we accompany those companies.
According to Schwab, if children are exposed to the WEF ideology at a young enough age, they can be completely indoctrinated. Psychologist Jesse Bering, author of Perv, The Sexual Deviant and All of Us, also urges the reader to sympathise with child molesters. The BBC, which famously spent decades covering up for Britain's most notorious paedophile, Jimmy Savile, also wants us to think positively about the new generation of paedophiles. The New York Times, always at the forefront of the globalist agenda, ran an op-ed arguing that paedophilia is not a crime. According to the Times, civil rights protections must be extended to paedophiles. Salon also got in on the act, urging us to meet paedophiles. According to CNN, one cannot choose to be a paedophile. CNN countered with an article proclaiming that paedophiles are not monsters or social deviants living in the shadows. The paedophilia epidemic that's sweeping the world is actually nature's gift to humanity, according to Klaus Schwab, whose World Economic Forum has declared that paedophiles are being created by nature in increasingly large numbers for a reason. According to a research paper presented at the WEF in Davos, the paedophile phenomenon represents nature's attempt to cleanse the earth and save humanity from itself. This precept infests every fibre of their ideology, from elections to open borders to climate change, abortion, paedophilia, you name it. I know at times it can feel dark and lonely, but the masses are waking up and the elite will not be able to take over as easily as they expected. Pointing out the wickedness of the elite never seems to make a dent or have any impact on them. Why? Because they have no shame. They have no shame because they have no moral compass. They have no moral compass because they believe God is dead and they live according to the rule of do as thou wilt.
All this story about Jesus rising from the dead and being the Son of God, this is fake news. Humans are now hackable animals. You know, the whole idea that humans have, you know, they have this soul or spirit and they have free will and nobody knows what's happening inside me. So whatever I choose, whether in the election or whether in the supermarket, this is my free will, that's over. Developing even bigger powers than ever before, we are really acquiring divine powers of creation and destruction. We are really upgrading humans into gods. We are acquiring, for instance, the power to re-engineer life.
According to Harari, there is no place in the modern world for traditional Christian values. It's time for the world to accept the divinity of the World Economic Forum and let go of old-fashioned social taboos. According to the political scientist Joseph Overton, there is a window within which there are ideas considered acceptable by society, tolerated therefore even by those who do not share them. It is a scale of perceptions, whereby one goes from seeing an idea as unthinkable to seeing it as radical, then acceptable, then popular, and at that point translated into practice by politics. From this Overton window idea, there has been a move to theorize how an idea that is currently radical can succeed in becoming accepted by society or even become popular policy. They have infiltrated the schools, plotting a course straight at our children. And we already know they have infiltrated the cabinets. Governments across the world, operating under the control of the World Economic Forum, are waging war on our children. Klaus Schwab's young global leaders are systematically attempting to normalize paedophilia and decriminalize sex with children across the world. In Jacinda Ardern's far-left New Zealand, a judge declared that 12-year-old children can consent to sex with adults. You heard me correctly. The case in question featured a 45-year-old man whose defense centered on the claim that his 12-year-old victim wanted it. I know she was a child, but the way she came to me was like a mature woman. I refused her, but she kept coming back to me. She truly wanted to do this, the 45-year-old said of the child who was just 12 years old at the time. In the final days of the trial, Judge Earwicker addressed the issue of consent for a person under 16. Legally, a person under 16 cannot give consent for charges of indecent acts. Therefore, as a jury, all you need to decide is if the indecent acts took place, he said. Then came the kicker. The judge told the jury, but as for sexual intercourse, a person under 16 can give consent. You need to consider whether or not the consent was given based on the evidence you have. Welcome to Klaus Schwab's New Zealand. But wait until you hear what's happening in France. Emmanuel Macron was re-elected as president last year in an election widely regarded as suspect. It's perhaps no surprise that he is also one of Klaus Schwab's young global leaders, and France is also normalizing paedophilia. President Macron's government voted against having an age of consent in France in 2018, becoming one of the first nations to give in to pressure from an international cabal determined to decriminalize sex with children across the world. This means federal law in France has no legal age of consent, and adults who have sex with children of any age will not be prosecuted for rape if the child victim is unable to prove violence, threat, duress, or surprise. The draft bill against sexual and gender-based violence, known as the Schiappa Law, was signed into law by the French Parliament on the 3rd of August.
And nobody knows what's happening inside me, so whatever I choose, whether in the election or whether in the supermarket, this is my free will, that's over.
Well, obviously we have a rapist in Lincoln Park. He's climbing in your windows, he's snatching your people up, trying to rape them, so y'all need to hide your kids, hide your wife, hide your kids, hide your wife, hide your kids, hide your wife, and hide your husband, cause they're raping everybody out here. You don't have to come and confess, we're looking for you, we go find you, we go find you, so you can run and tell that, run and tell that, run and tell that. Oh boy, we got your t-shirt and that fingerprints and all, you are so dumb, you are really dumb, for real.